to the... Okay, so I'm going to start this one a little bit differently, just because I think this is such a this is one of the things that makes us unique with accessible travel planners and becoming a certified accessible travel planner. And I know that many who are on the call that are already in accessible travel and in the certification and CATP community chose the scenario when you do take your certification. One of the scenarios you can pick is, we have a wheelchair mobility one. We have a child with autism going to Disney World. We have one that's a veteran with PTSD who wants to take a relaxing vacation. And so the people who have chosen this one, it's a little bit more of I would say the ones for neurodivergence and the invisible disabilities, mental health, cognitive. We have one with a mild cognitive impairment as a scenario too that you can write about and trip plan for. And sometimes these are a little less, there's like more options really in some ways, but there's also more questions because it's not as well understood. I always say that accessibility is not just about roll-ins and ramps, and elevators. It's about, like being in a noisy environment when you have sound sensitivity, and being in crowds when you're crowd averse, and going at the hottest time of the year and the most crowded time of the year. Like, you're in a trip to Europe right now. Good luck to you because it's hotter than Hades. But so there's a lot that goes into it, and I think people who live with mental health or behavioral cognitive challenges uh, are often sort of an underrepresented group. And since I am personally in I have a large representation within myself of these different categories of people, that I decided to start kind of in a more personal way, because when I started to think about it, this is how accessible travel planners truly came to be, is because I have spent massive amounts of time, money, and energy traveling to therapize and heal myself, even though I am a therapist and there are traditional, means. So, um, I really started to think about this, and then I've thrown out a couple of questions in the last couple of weeks as I was preparing for this, because one of the questions I asked on my Facebook, just on my personal Facebook, was, what does travel as therapy mean to you? And I got a wide variety of answers, just like getting away, unplugging, relaxing, enjoying. And then one of the counter questions I had to that was, but how is that therapeutic? And how is that, uh, is every trip therapeutic? You guys can put your answers in there if you think, does every bit of travel have to be therapeutic, or should it be therapeutic, or is it therapeutic? And that's a very opinion-based question, but I think, like, for me, I definitely, I personally have many different reasons why I travel, and some of it's adventure, and some of it's therapy, and some of it's to go see people, some of it's to go see something, um, and sometimes it's to support. It's like a staycation. Like, I went to a psychiatrist for the first time in my life, a German one that didn't speak much English, and I didn't speak much German, but we made it work, for the first time in my life, to an actual psychiatrist, on Wednesday. And it was about 2.5 hours away. And one of my favorite hotels in the whole wide world is a half hour away from it. So I booked a night in the hotel the night before, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting up and traffic and weather and all that kind of stuff. But also they have it's attached to the Munich airport. It's the Hilton Munich airport. And they have a pool that looks like it belongs in a resort. They have, I have diamond status. They have an executive lounge. I went and had a nice dinner, a couple drinks, all that kind of stuff in there the night before. And then I was upgraded. So I had this king bed suite with, and I just like, I took like a face mask and I did a little face mask and took a bath and all this kind of stuff while I was in there. And I realized that, this was my therapy before the therapy type of deal. And this was more, if you guys, I think most of you are familiar with my personal situation that are on the call, but I live in Germany and I was recently terminated from my job as an occupational therapist. And it was very sudden, it was very brutal. And it was while I was on sick leave, experiencing mostly mental health issues related to burnout and a stress reaction I had to some false accusations at work. And then they just kept coming with it. So I actually have had to gather different medical opinions, all this kind of stuff, to be able to personally like represent myself. I have a lawyer. I filed a wrongful termination suit. There's a hearing in the morning. I actually had to, this is a total side note, but I had to ask for the video link because it's a 4-hour drive away. So I would have had to drive 4 hours to go to a court for 15 minutes in another language. So I have a video link that also allows me some personal peace and decreased anxiety because I don't want to be in a room with these people because these people have become, sort of like my abusers, if you will, and have created a great amount of stress in addition to me financially and even with my status here to remain in the country because my visa depends on being able to having this specific job. So health insurance, all this kind of stuff. So they left me in a pickle. So I was a little bit nervous about this. So being able to just take that travel, and that was definitely a therapeutic evening, going to the pool, sleeping in a little bit, only having to drive half an hour. And then, I had a successful session with her where she was able to make some recommendations for me. But I realized that this has gone from I just saw this. I just saw this comment come up. All right. Let me just pause for a second. Um, all right. Okay. All right. Oh, cool. I didn't know that about you, Susan. Okay. So, okay, yeah. So I asked about if travel has to be therapeutic all the time, and Cindy said no, it doesn't have to be, but I believe most of it is therapeutic in one way or another. Yes. And I believe that there's also ways that it should be therapeutic, but because of poor planning or just poor knowledge or poor understanding, that often it isn't. Of course, we're going to talk about that. But briefly, to back up, I yes, sometimes you need a vacation for your vacation. That's why I saw pop-ups. I think parents a lot of times experience that. Anyway, so I realized that, I was first introduced to travel when I was 5 years old. And it was to airlift me from Grand Junction, my hometown, to Denver because I had leukemia at the time. And I got diagnosed with meningitis while I was undergoing treatment. And that's very extremely dangerous at any time. But when you have no platelets or, white blood cells are attacking your body, it's pretty deadly. So I got to go on an airplane when I was 5 years old, which was very unheard of um, in the early 80s for a kid. I didn't do that. So that was my first experience. I actually have pretty decent memories of it. I had a glowworm that I kept making glow. And then, we actually traveled as a family after that back and forth to Denver many times. And we had family trips growing up. It was great. Most people know I was in a bad car accident when I was 18, this is it was 1995. So this is my 30th anniversary of that car accident when I was 18. And I've had to date 25 surgeries, and most on my face, my eyes, and my legs. And so there's been as I've gone through life and stuff has happened, like infections and whatnot, and different types of traumas, sexual trauma, all that kind of stuff. It's evolved into the person that I am today has become a person that needs special accommodations, even just to get through her day, and possibly needs a total change in job. And I was riding two ponies with one ass, as they say, with between travel and working travel in the evenings and going to work during the day in this with this German company. So I was literally wearing myself out. And I, like in 2016, when I lived in Italy, I it was right after I had received been a victim of a pretty bad sexual assault. And it just ended up being a 2.5 year venture into healing and therapy. And I traveled to, I think, 27 countries, even though I was developing another major medical issue with migraine headaches and sensory neurodivergent changes and all this kind of stuff. But I just have never stopped. I did my internships in Hawaii. That was right around September 11th. And so I actually had a very different view of all of that from all the way from Hawaii. And so I just wanted to like, I really wanted to like anchor in personally why this is so important to me. I lived in Hawaii for many years after that. I've lived in 7 different states. I've been to 47 states and 47 countries. This is pretty cool if you think about it. And I just like, I never stopped. And so for everybody, this was a natural thing for me to get into the travel business as an independent travel agent, but then starting to have conversations with people, a lot of OTs, obviously we have a lot on the call tonight, and but other healing professions, health coaches, nurses, PTs, obviously PT speech, all the rehab professions, and mental health professionals. There's a really big growing interest of mental health professionals to get into travel. So I just wanted to take a little minute at the beginning of this call tonight to just personally say how important this is to me. And I did not even think about how the student loan call that we're doing on the 20th, and I'll share the link in the comments towards the end, so that you guys can get registered for that. Send you the replay, hopefully, if everything works out. We'll get it to you one way or the other. And then I didn't realize how closely linked that my like financial health and student loan debt and all that kind of stuff could be linked to this mental health and travel as therapy. And so this has kind of become our health, our mental and um, almost like spiritual financial health month. And so I'm doing something special at the end of the month for those who decide to become join and become part of the CATP community. I want to do something that I consider therapy, travel as therapy for each person who's already a part of it or who wants to become a part of it. And especially if you're passionate about this aspect of accessible travel like I am. So without further delay, I will now share my screen. I think so. Mm, 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 mm. And I'm not gonna lie, I did that so we can get some good clips without the without the slideshow present. So, okay. Just put this down. And then I'm gonna go slideshow. And then I'm gonna go, hold on. Okay. Ian, can you thumbs up me if you can see, or like whatever, if you can see my screen? Can you see it okay? Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having your camera on. All right. So here we go. Travel as therapy, planning meaningful journeys for cognitive, emotional, and behavioral well-being. And I was questioning whether or not to put the cognitive and mental health aspects of travel altogether, because they can be kind of different, but I figure they're all stemming from neurological, neurodiversity, thoughts, actions, emotions. So I wanted to do this, and plus we're going to be introducing some new stuff starting next month. So I wanted to get through the major the major aspects of accessible travel that we work with. So next month, be looking forward to something a little bit different, but that's actually building upon this. And I'm pretty excited. Ever since I got canned, I have all this creative energy and I'm coming up with all this stuff. So to them. Okay. So why travel as therapy? Travel offers powerful therapeutic benefits that extend far beyond simple leisure. So it can be stress and resilience. New environments can break negative thought patterns and provide perspective, break up the routines. You can often develop skills while you're traveling, problem solving, thinking on the fly, abilities, adaptability, and confidence in navigating unfamiliar situations. And, you know, and you can often have clinical goal alignment if you're also working in a therapeutic environment with a therapist, or, you're referring someone if you're a therapist, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but travel experiences can support therapeutic objectives while fulfilling the universal human desire for exploration, which is also the universal human desire for exploration is also a really great reason to get into the travel business. Just in general, just regular old travel, because everybody wants to do it. So who does travel as therapy appeal to? So obviously we talked about this a little bit already, but mental and behavioral health professionals, so therapists, counselors, psychologists, social workers, seeking innovating and therapeutic approaches for their clients. Obviously, speech and OT and others with a cognitive focus. Specialists working with communication, sensory processing, cognitive rehab, who want to expand their toolkit. Individuals and caregivers, people living with cognitive, mental, and emotional differences, and those who support them. And then inclusive driven travel professionals. Since we went global with accessible travel planners, we're actually getting some really good fresh energy from other travel agencies and growing in a lot of different ways. So this is exciting, and we have a lot of new people coming on recently and my old school OGs, that came on 2 years ago when we started developing all this, 2.5 years ago. So we're getting a nice mix of people, and it's anywhere from the individuals with a differing ability themselves to like I said, these varying levels of professionals, to the travel professionals who want to specialize in something like this to make the world more accessible to others. This approach bridges clinical practice with real-world experiences, creating meaningful journeys tailored to diverse needs. So for almost 3 years now, my sponsor and team trainer, Sarah, and I have been partnering together to be able to help people combine what their skill sets are, or what their personal experiences are, lived experiences, whatever, with the travel industry. And we've had great success helping over 1,000 people in the last 3 years join us in travel. So this got a little messed up, but actually it looks pretty good. When I was transferring it from one slide set to another, but defining cognitive, emotional, and behavioral access, what I want to mainly focus on here is that, and it's a little bit crooked, I see still, but is that where these things are different, they're also interwoven, right? So you're, and even they interweave in with people who have physical or neurodivergent abilities, like the differing abilities. So we have, like obviously when they interact in 2 or 3 different ways, then that's even more specialization and customization that we need to have. So and a perfect example of this, I worked with soldiers with mild traumatic brain injury in 2016 through 2018 in Italy, and they almost always had co-occurring PTSD. There's a lot of emerging science and research coming out about the chronic traumatic encephalopathy and all this kind of stuff. So there was a lot of times you couldn't really tell. It's not like, oh, well, they have a TBI, so they have this this is presenting, and they have PTSD, so this is presenting. And then a lot of times there's depression, anxiety, panic, all those kind of things going on as well. There's family dysfunction, there's all that kind of stuff. So we all are kind of this big soupy, combination, like a unique footprint. And oftentimes, like PTSD can also create cognitive and memory issues because the very mechanism of PTSD is to encapsulate a bad or terrifying memory. And so your memory, like when I was in my car accident, I don't remember the previous 10 minutes before. I was a fully functional human being that got behind the driver's seat and got behind the wheel and drove for about 2 or 3 miles before the car accident happened. I do not remember the 10 minutes before that, and I do not, well, I only have a few minutes I don't remember after that. But the brain blocks out what it doesn't want you to remember. And so that can then go over into mental health because it can be really distressing to have memory issues as like a 30-year-old who is trying to be a full-time soldier and all that kind of stuff. So that's just one example of how, and so we have to look at this. You have to continually, and OTs get this training as a whole person. And you're looking not just at the thing that brought them into the clinic to see you when you're doing an evaluation, but you take a look at the whole person. So, and I think actually if someone has like a physical disability, if they're a wheelchair user or something like that, it might get overlooked. These domains might get overlooked. And so that's where I think, again, we shine with looking at the complex accessible traveler, and can really be beneficial in the travel space for people. Okay. So, barriers to access in traditional travel, unpredictability and overstimulation, crowded environments, unexpected changes, and sensory overload can trigger anxiety, meltdowns, or cognitive overwhelm. Communication barriers, difficulty expressing needs, understanding instructions, or processing information in unfamiliar settings. I know for me, I am extremely sound sensitive, and I'm okay for a little while, but I've had times where an overhead speaker starts going off and I can't get away from it in the airport. And then I am completely left without being able to function until the thing is done. And then I have to go reset. And, you can't just always put on noise canceling headphones, right? Because you need to also hear what they're saying, but, or it's muffled, or it's, there's also crying kids and stuff around. So that's very cognitively distracting for me. And I can't focus on anything else. Um, but a lot of times, even people with mild cognitive impairment, and I think, probably at some point, seniors in this day and age are at a certain point, they're a little bit slower, and they may have undiagnosed, just like mild cognitive impairments. So those are things we can pick up when we might be originally seeing them for like, oh, well, grandma wants to go on a cruise. Okay, well, we want to make sure she doesn't, elope in the night and accidentally Rose and Jack over the front or something like that, so that was a bad example. Lack of trained providers. Few travel professionals understand cognitive, emotional, behavioral access needs and how to customize to avoid it or enhance appropriately. I think, again, this is why we started and where we shine. And then the stigmas that can go on both in the head of the person with the invisible disability and externally. Mental health and cognitive differences are often overlooked and stigmatized in hospitality and tourism settings. I travel with a service dog. He is an anxiety and PTSD service dog. He's the cutest thing on the planet. And 95% of the time, I have zero problem getting him in hotels, and Europe is way better. I don't know about the UK. They're a little picky about that. But I have, I put service on him. I even got him like a identification card, which you don't have to do, and all that kind of stuff. And still occasionally I have someone who questions me. They try to charge me a fee. Sometimes it's different over over in Europe from what it is in the States and the ADA, but but that's one reason why I stay in major chains like Hilton, because I know that they adhere to the ADA. Anyways, it creates, when someone questions me or tries to deny me my right to have my service animal without additional fees, I have a meltdown. And then he goes ape shit and he licks my face and barks and makes me hug him like a baby so he can lick the back of my neck and calm me down. And then I go, you see, but those are unnecessary um, triggers. You know what I'm saying? And I've tried my best, but if I flare, girlfriend's got some PTSD. Okay, so there's so much that is needed there in that space. So I should have put a picture of Oscar up here. Principles of therapeutic travel planning. Predictability, creating clear structure, routines, and expectations to reduce anxiety and cognitive load. We personalize by tailoring experience to individual preferences, triggers, like I just talked about, coping strategies and interests. Collaboration, working directly with the travelers and their support network to ensure needs are understood. And we are also strive to be truly trauma informed, because there's a lot of exploitation of trauma informed care happening now. Um, but in your travel space, in your own business, you get to be the person that you really want to be and not who the insurance companies want you to be. So that's why so many healthcare professionals are joining into this, so that they can use their skills of why they went to school, or their lived experiences, and be able to truly create unique and amazing experiences for people. Okay. So pre-trip planning for wellness and safety. This is where also I think we shine, because people don't, this and one of my newsletters last month talked about how long before the actual packing of the suitcase, um, we are involved with helping people. We do client-centered care, same thing, person-centered assessment in the travel space. I think it's nice to have so many healthcare professionals and allied health professionals in our group, that we can come together and create these really, we have a really awesome intake form that we can give people to really kind of understand what they're going to be traveling with, because you also might have groups that are traveling together, and grandma has cognitive impairment, and young John has autism, and someone's using a walker, and they're all going on a trip together for a family trip that they take every year on a cruise, and we have to keep them all safe and happy and alive and regulated and all that kind of stuff. So um sometimes people get into this and they're like, this is a lot of work, like accessible travel planning. It is, but it is rewarding. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about a trip that I am currently in the process of planning, um, that is for someone who honestly has some issues similar to me, but also some other special accommodations that need to happen to fully support a successful vacation. So support planning, medication management strategies, routine maintenance, identifying necessary adaptive tools. Obviously, there's apps. There are things you can travel with. We can, like there's just so many different things that you can help people come prepared with. And we're going to be moving into spaces where we actually work with people in the months before. What do they call this, like a teaser, I guess. I don't know what the modern word is for it, but we're going to be moving pretty big into where we support, educate, and help people, even in addition to their travel planners and their certified accessible travel planners, in the months before they travel, so that we can ensure that they feel grounded, secure, confident, and like they know, and nimble and flexible, like if they get out there, if someone wants a solo trip, because mama just got divorced, and the kids are with she's taking 2 weeks to go travel Italy by herself. Like, we want to make sure that she is equipped, to handle her anxiety and depression that she also has, but also have a great time, and also stay safe. So there's so much that can be done in the pre-planning phase that just really creates that extra special, fabric woven into a person's trip. So risk reduction, oop, 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 oop. Sorry, very sensitive mouse pad, apparently. um, Identifying potential challenges and developing specific mitigation strategies, kind of talked about that already. Building autonomy, creating opportunities for choice and control throughout the planning process. And I think that's what, like, I was like literally like my whole time in Italy and Europe before, and even kind of this last time in a totally different way, have been like a trial and error. I almost say it was like the longest, like coolest job interview for becoming an accessible travel professional and someone who founded something like this, because I had to make so many accommodations for myself. I had to learn these apps and different ways to figure out how to have the, best location, read reviews, all the kind of stuff, all that research that we now do for people. You know, it takes me hours and I love it, but not everybody does. I even told, one of my travel clients said, don't worry about anything until after your hearing and everything's going on with your, um, with your court case and your wrongful termination. I said, no, no, no. Travel planning soothes me. It's what I do for fun, So, um, like, so, yeah, but I love to equip people. That's my OT, that's myself. That's the accessible travel planner in me. So, um, okay. So airport transit and arrival support. Now, the AI that helps me make these kept trying to put people in wheelchairs into my invisible disability mental health um, presentation. However, I left this one because I feel there's something important to say about getting help at the airport. For one, if you need support, if you need TSA cares, if you need a sunflower lanyard, which is just a way to show that you have an invisible disability that airport professionals recognize, but other people may not know what's going on there. Um, then I I strongly suggest, and I know that like Amberly, who has like chronic pain and conditions, and a few other people who just live with different conditions, like I always was very resistant to getting wheelchair assistance because I don't technically need it. And I was like, I had these thoughts and my own stigmas about taking up that for somebody who needs it at the airport. But what I realized is my fatigue levels, like when I was moving my service dog Oscar from Colorado to Germany, it was a multi-day process that I did by myself. It was multi-step, and by the time I laid over in Charlotte for a couple days at a stay bridge or something, I got super cheap, awesome travel agent, right? And so I stayed there for a couple days just to kind of get him, like let him rest and get ready for the 10-hour flight that was coming up. And when I got there, I had two big bags, a dog that is super trained, but not necessarily in like walking and obeying those kind of commands, but he did a really good job. I had two big bags. I had a carry-on, I had the dog, I had the dog's bag, and it was a struggle to even get in. The Charlotte airport was under construction. And so they had their wheelchair and their special services off to one side. And as they came through, and it was sweating, the air conditioning wasn't working, and I was just sweating. And they said, do you want help? And I said, no, I don't need help. I don't need help. And they said, you know, well, okay, well, there's a big long line over there. And I went and stood in the line, and I was hot, I was overwhelmed, I was overstimulated, I was overtired, and I just started crying. And meanwhile, Oscar's going off because he doesn't like to be in the carrier, so he's going off making friends and like all this kind of stuff while I've got the leash on him. And I just started crying, and the line didn't move for about 20 minutes. And I got out of line and I went back over to the wheelchair people, the special services, and I said, I think I need your help. And they're like, she actually, she was like, I knew you'd be back, like, so they checked me in, they took my bags, they had me sit, there. We went and used the pet relief areas. I've used the human relief areas, and then they took me right to the gate, and I used TSA cares. They were they were wonderful to my dog, and they got me right through. I went through a special line, and I also had pre-check. So there's just little things that you can do to make it simpler for yourself. Even though you can physically walk, would it be beneficial to accept the help and take a ride? Take the wheelchair Uber to your gate. So like I said, we teach all about TSA Cares, which is a wonderful program that TSA does. I know a TSA and wonderful in the same sentence, but the Sunflower Lanyard, like I said, is a program it's a nonprofit that you can get, and there's a list of airports that recognize the Sunflower Lanyard, so that as you're going through, if you have that autistic kiddo or severe panic and anxiety that gets worse in the airport, or whatever the case may be, you can just wear that Sunflower Lanyard. You don't have to have a sign or, and make any big to do. And then anxiety management, preparation tools like virtual tours, social stories if they're, obviously if you have kids going along, but you can also use AI to help make the plan for the person that says, where are the quiet spaces, sensory spaces, prayer rooms, whatever the case may be, so they can go and take a time out. And grounding techniques specific to travel environments. Physiological support strategies for managing jet lag, sleep disruption, and sensory challenges during the long journeys. Communication support, so tools and strategies for expressing needs, processing information, and navigating complex environments. Um, so Lodging and itinerary considerations, supportive environments, selecting accommodations with sensory friendly features, quieter locations. And this is something I'm going through with my current client. She's actually my former neighbor. I've known her for years, and she has had multiple TBIs. She has vestibular problems. She has vision disturbance, and she has then the ensuing cognitive and mental health challenges that go along with that. She was used a very active and avid traveler in her younger days, and she came to me with a trip she wanted to take that's coming up actually fairly quickly to the UK and then into France to go to Normandy. And they don't want to visit any of the big cities because it's too overstimulating for her. She's sound and light sensitive. And so it has been some major research to figure out going into the places that are not Paris or London or, like some of the fail safes you think about. They wanted to travel by train a lot. I've kind of cut a lot of that out. They had 6 destinations they wanted to go to in 2 weeks. We've now cut it down to 3. And staying, and then you got to think about when they're flying overnight. When they first get here, they'll be jet lagged, and so then putting in an extra day of just nothing but sleep and getting yourself acclimated to the time zone change. And they are flying first class. They have the luxury of doing that, so they 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 dropped more on their flights than I would on a whole vacation for 10 people. But it's like, but it's worth it to them. And so they, but a lot of train for someone with vestibular issues, and there's just so many things that this can go. And then even like the hotels, I had to do a special, asking ChatGPT, and it really was good about saying, well, this hotel is just a little bit outside of town, but you can still walk into town, and it's noted for being quiet. And I read the reviews of this one, and it says you can often hear the noises in the alley. And of course, she doesn't want any of that. And they're traveling in October, which is just a way better time. So, obviously the environment around, like staying right in town where there's going to be a bar that goes till 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's no AC, so they want to keep their windows open, whatever the case may be. You have to think about all of that, and really even call around and ask around different places for these invisible disabilities, and each one's going to be a little bit different, right? So, structure and flexibility, creating itineraries with balanced activities, schedules, downtime, and buffer periods. So I talked about that a little bit more. Morning activities followed by afternoon rest and optional evening experiences, comfort versus growth, balancing familiar routines with carefully introduced novelty. So maintaining sleep and meal routines while gradually introducing new experiences. And a lot of the times these people, things they could do in their 20s or before their, before their conditions grew and worsened. Like I used to just travel. I used to go somewhere like night here, night here, night here, night here. If anyone who saw Lauren Featheroff going on her Switzerland trip, they were on the train every single day going to a new town every single day. It was like, I think in 14 days, they stayed in 10 hotels. So that's not something that's really feasible for a lot of people, especially if you deal with a mental or cognitive or behavioral or whatever the case may be, condition, a brain, trauma, whatever. That's not going to be super fun for certain people. Okay, and I'm just gonna look at the comments later, so I don't have to keep going back into it. But I see you guys having the comments in there. So, oops. So, okay. Communication and structure, visual schedules and social stories, AI assistance for scenario, um, based contingencies, communication cards and for common needs or app-based stuff, obviously. Translation apps, that's a huge one. I use it every day of my life. ChatGPT is also really handy to have to translate different things. I have to every single day right now take a German written document and throw it into ChatGPT and not only say translate it, but tell me what I need to do with it because I get sent to collections sometimes because I don't understand. I need to pay a bill or whatever the case may be. And they really don't like to have any other options available. So clear written itineraries with photos. Uh, and then obviously, like, regulating wellness, noise canceling headphones, that's just been a lifesaver for me. A lot of airlines have the white noise app. If you plug it into their little seat or whatever, you can have a white noise feature come on when you want to go to sleep. And you can adjust the brightness on the on the video. So medication tracking and reminder apps, portable sensory tools such as fidgets and weighted items, other things, mindfulness and grounding technique cards, whatever the case may be. And we've gotten into where we're going to be starting to do customized travel kits for people, and even stuff like coloring books of the places where they're going and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good stuff we can do. So just some quick case examples. Obviously, I talked about the veteran with PTSD, an international trip with gradual exposure to crowds, quiet accommodations, options, and prearranged quiet spaces at major attractions. If they say they want to go to Italy, you're going to want to put them into Rome and Florence and Venice on that kind of trip in July. No, it's a bit like if they want to go to Italy, let's find some out of the way places and let's go in like November or December when it's still nice, but the crowds are just a fraction of what they normally are in the summer and the weather is so much better. Like a woman with depression, like I said, solo trip with structured yet flexible daily itinerary, connection points with support systems. There's a lot of like solo travel together if you're 50 plus and you want to slow travel through Europe. I mean, like you can travel solo with others and or you can do it on your own, just knowing that there's going to be certain times where a support system in place, something in the local community. There's things like Internations, there's Meetup, there's Facebook groups galore, Girls Love Travel, Women Love Travel, 50 plus women who are from the western part of the United States love travel. I mean, there's so many things that you can point them to and use as a resource. An autistic teenager with regulation needs, the family vacation we need to have sensory breaks, visual schedules, social stories, carefully selected activities, and um, built-in changes and alterations. That's what one thing we focus on is let's do some contingencies. We're big on that. We're big on checking and double checking the travel plan right before they go, all that kind of stuff. And then the couple with dementia, there's a river cruise with memory support tools. I actually like had people tell us horror stories about, seeing a man who and his wife, he had really bad dementia, and he kept getting out of the room, and he even got off the ship one time without, a lot of without someone seeing it. And she was of course worn out because she's older too, and she's having a 24-hour care give this person and make sure that they don't put themselves in danger. So there's so much that we can do to support them before, during, after, even if it's having someone else go with them to help, which is also something we're developing, is our travel concierge for accessible travel. So river cruise with memory support tools, consistent cabin environment, guided experiences, support, family routines, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so, and then if you're thinking of starting this as a business, uh, the opportunity is pretty much whatever you can make of it, because when you specialize in accessible travel, especially if you're willing to specialize in something like this, you don't have to only book accessible trips. That's and I think every trip almost has an accessibility feature to it, but just travel in general, there's a huge need for travel agents with this kind of knowledge. You know, 33% growth in accessible travel in the recent, I would say, even year, as there becomes more awareness that people like us exist, right? And then, I mean, these are all estimated, but a $58 billion market value estimated annual spending on accessible travel in the US alone. You can, and then 87% traveler loyalty. Obviously, if you create an amazing opportunity for them, you're going to get to know all about them and what they need and can help them. And then they're going to go have an amazing time. You're going to feel good and they're going to come back to you. So there's really no reason not to do this, even if you have to put a little bit more work into it in the beginning. Because I still say that what you will get paid on an accessible trip, even in an accessible trip, will be far um, greater than what you would spend trading hours for dollars in a job with just you know, decreasing quality of life and pay if you're an OT. Oops, was that out loud? Okay, so you can expand your practice. You can offer group experiences. You can have a dedicated business that focuses on nothing but mental wellness. And it doesn't even have to be like, we don't have to take some yoga trip to Costa Rica. Like we say, every travel can be therapeutic if it's done right, but it can also be an unwinding disaster, if it's not done right. But certainly is a market also for those, yoga, getaway, relaxation, meditation, whatever trips as well. But like I said, like last week when I was going in to see the psychiatrist, I took that opportunity to do one of my favorite things and hang out at a hotel with a cool pool. Okay, so we basically have three different options for people when they're interested in becoming a certified accessible travel planner. Option one, and this is these first two options. Well, honestly, like if you're not a travel professional yet, and I'm going to give you a form you can fill out, but we will help you start your business, and I can give you a you know start your business as a travel agent, and we can give you the information on that if you haven't already seen that. If you are already a travel professional, you can obviously, like, option two and option three are going to be more applicable to you, as you are probably looking at this to expand your services and offerings and you have a passion for it. So option one, become your own CATP with mental health focus, or just any, like just a accessible travel focus in general, but you certainly could focus on nothing but this and really have um, a pretty banging business with you at the center. And that's kind of how it started for me, right? And now I train hundreds of people and there's thousands of trips happening. Well, we'll say hundreds of trips at this point because we're still kind of new, but that's the goal, right? We want to help a million people travel better. that wouldn't have because if we didn't exist. So become your own CATP, look for yourself, your family, your friends. If that's where you want to start, that's great. You know, people do this, it's more a hobby. I love to travel. I want to help people. I have, you know, a kid with anxiety. I have depression, you know, so and so has autism. Like there, our families and just our communities could really benefit from you doing this alongside the other things you do because you're already probably doing it for free anyway, so why not get paid? Option two is to become a CATP, a certified accessible travel planner, if that was unclear, with a mental health focus. So you can integrate travel planning into your existing practice, focus on clients you already serve, start with small local experiences. There's a lot of ways too that we talk about in the course about how to build with you know, in your community, in person, and going to different events and different types of things. So build partnerships with supportive travel providers, develop specialized assessments and tools. So this is best for it. This shouldn't say practitioners. That was probably my brain just going into um, practitioner mode, but professionals wanting to add a new dimension to their services. And then option three is to launch a specialized enterprise. If you already have a travel business going, I know some of you have been with me, or some of you have been travel professionals for a long time on the side of something else, and you're wanting to grow it more to full time. This is a great way to do it, and we will be having more services probably to help you do this and to give you like a step-by-step blueprint of how to do that, where you can do coaching and travel companionship and all that kind of stuff to really make this your full-time gig, like I'm doing and I'm working on. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. If you're ready to begin your your journey in therapeutic travel, I am going to give you a little form you can fill out. I know that most people who are on the live call are already in some ways, but there's a few that aren't. So I'm going to actually, let's see. Oops, wrong one, wrong one. I'll do this and then I'll stop the recording. Comments. And then I'm going to go back and read all your comments. Okay. Oh, look, I almost kept it on time, even though I blabbered on in the beginning. Okay, so this is the form. Copy link. I love it when it does this. Yeah. Copy it from my phone, paste it in my computer. So this is the form you can fill out if you want more information, get into a conversation with me and or the person who told you about this. Let me know where you're at in your process and what you're looking at and being interested in. And then I am also going to share the student loan call that we have coming up. This is for everybody. I just thought this guy was so helpful. So if you know people who have student loan debt, or if you have kids, or if you're a parent with a loan, and trying to figure out how to afford it, or you have it. I mean, sometimes now we're entering into a second generation of loans. It's just getting ridiculous. So you can register here and you won't get a confirmation email because the system's down, but I will make sure that you have the information long before you get on. And I think that is it. So I will go ahead and stop the recording.